Hi, and welcome to the Freeman Show. Today I am privileged and extremely honoured to be with Dr. Joe Dispenza, neuroscientist and author of Evolve Your Brain. Also starred in the acclaimed movie What the Bleep Do We Know. Hi Joe.
Pleasure to be with you.
Pleasure. Thanks for coming.
Easy.
Easy. I just want to say before we start, thank you for your 2-day workshop at the University College London, which was an old university I used to go to study biochemical engineering. What was funny that when I went to the actual theatre, it reminded me of my past, and old habits started to reoccur, and I started to regress into my old identities and certain behaviours. And it astounded me to know that I was running old programs from the past in terms of my behaviours during the event. I just want to start off by asking, how do you change habits, and where did it come from?
Well, every time we have a thought, we make a chemical. If you have a great thought or an unlimited thought or a joyful thought, your brain turns on a set of circuits in different sequences and patterns that produce chemicals for you to begin to feel exactly the way you were just thinking, great or unlimited or joyful. Now, the moment we begin to feel the way we think, because the brain is in constant communication with the body, we begin to think the way we feel.
Right.
And that cycle of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking creates what I call a state of being. And as an example, if you have a negative thought, you're going to activate a set of circuits that are going to make you feel negative. The moment you begin to feel negative, those feelings are going to drive your very thoughts for you to think more negative thoughts. And this cycle of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking creates a state of being where the person says, I am negative.
Okay.
Whenever we say I am anything, we're saying the mind and body are working together. My thoughts and feelings are aligned to a concept. Now, some people do this for 10 or 20 or 30 years, unconsciously. And this cycle that goes on, the redundancy of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking over time, conditions the body to memorize that emotion better than the conscious mind. Whenever the body knows better than the mind, that's called a habit. A habit is when the body is the mind. So, by the time we're 35 years old, 95% of who we are sits in a subconscious program in which the body has become the mind. So the person may consciously want to change with the 5% of their conscious mind, and they might want to think positively, but they've memorized negativity. So we have mind and body working in opposition. To change, to truly change, is to think greater than how we feel, to think greater than the body. And that takes an act of will. So if you think about it, the 95% of those behaviors that we memorize become automatic programs that define our emotional reactions, our memorized behaviors, our attitudes, our perceptions and beliefs. And so people say, well, what does that mean? If you can't consciously remember a phone number, but you can pick up the receiver and dial the number,
Right.
Your body's practiced it so many times that it actually knows better than your brain. That's where 95% of who we are exists. So to change then is to get into the operating system of the subconscious and begin to reprogram it so that we can reemerge as a new identity or a new personality.
Okay, so I've got basically 5 years till I'm 35 to make significant changes.
Well,
so, other than saying that,
well,
can you
yes.
overcome it at a certain age? Is it?
So the psychological model tells us that the personality by the time we're 35 years old is a set of memorized behaviors that pretty much become unchangeable. But the latest research in neuroscience tells us we can absolutely change at any age.
At any age.
At any age. Now the difficulty is that most people wait for trauma, or they wait for crisis, or they wait for loss to begin to make changes because they can't go on business as usual any longer. They have to fundamentally change something about the way they think, the way they act, or the way they feel. Your personality is made up of how you think, you act, and feel. So when we usually reach crisis and we're knocked off our emotional center, that's when the person gets serious about change. And I think my message primarily is, why wait for crisis? Why not begin to see yourself as a work in progress and actually begin to make measurable changes before the crisis, before the trauma, to begin to learn and grow in a state of joy and inspiration instead of changing and growing in a state of pain and suffering. And so our personality creates our personal reality. So the present reality that most people are living in today are created by the present personality that they're presenting themselves as. Which means if you want to create a new personal reality, you have to fundamentally change something about your personality. You have to become somebody else. And this, herein lies the challenge, because that means then the person has to become conscious. They have to wake up for a period of time and observe the old self, how they think. Observe their unconscious behaviors and make them conscious. Observe the emotions that they romance and begin to realize that, you know, on a very practical level, those emotions aren't serving them. So the process of change requires unlearning and relearning. It requires losing one mind or losing your mind and creating a new one. It requires breaking the habit of being yourself and then reinventing a new self, to prune synaptic connections, as we call it in neuroscience, and sprout new connections, to literally unmemorize an emotion that's become part of your personality and then recondition the body to a new emotion or to a new mind. To change your energy is to change your life, and your energy is made up of how you feel. And so we have to get into the operating system then and begin to bring to our awareness the things that we've pretty much gone unconscious with.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And in terms of thinking and feeling, especially with men who are, or can be, they intellectualize, internalize, and sometimes, unfortunately, overanalyze situations with their mechanical left brain thinking, while women can emote certain feelings and associate with that. How does a man incorporate the two?
Well, that's a great question, because for most men, the male brain is wired for intention. Men, if you look at functional imagery of men resolving a problem, they have a very specific signature in their brain. They are very single-minded. They're very focused. They're very activity-driven. They're very methodical. They like to analyze. And because they have this intentional way about them, once they get clear on an image, an intention is just getting clear on what you want, they act on it. And for the most part, they really immediately get their behavior to match their intention. And that's kind of a beautiful model in the process of creation. However, that's only one element of creation. The thought processes, the intellect, the theory, the analytical thinking is only one part. Now, if you see a functional image of a man resolving a problem and you start giving them solutions to the problem, you would think that it would change the functional scan. And for the most part, it never does. The man is still thinking the same way, very single-minded. And the women will relate to this, because it's like when, you know, you're driving with your husband and the map says to turn left, and she's, you know, the wife says, you know, I think it says, the map says to turn left, and he says, we are going straight. I know it's this way. So they're very single-minded in the way they look at things. And the female brain is actually, on a functional scan resolving a problem, is quite an amazing sight, because all the circuits are firing simultaneously. It's like a lightning storm. And the reason that this is because when women in antiquity were in community, they took care of the young and the old. And so when men were hunters and they got single-minded and they wanted to, you know, provide, they were single-minded in their actions.
Looking for result.
That's right, result. The females were more into tend and befriend, to nurture. So they would, when they made a decision, they always considered the community. They always considered the whole. They took care of the young and the old. And what they would do is they would look at all experiences in their mind, all potential realities, and the end product of an experience is called an emotion. And so they would get in touch with how that experience would feel. And then they would pick one that felt right for everybody. And because of this, women could actually feel events before they happen. They could actually get in touch with the outcome ahead of the actual experience. That process requires zero intellect. You cannot actually intellectualize, because most men would say, well, I haven't experienced the event yet, so how do I know how it feels? And a woman says, well, of course I can feel it, because I can get in touch with it. Now, when you resonate with an outcome ahead of the experience, you surrender, literally surrender to a future potential without physical evidence yet. Now, the process of creation requires both elements. It requires both intention, getting clear on what we want, and then surrendering to the feeling ahead of the actual event. And so, if you see a man who's very single-minded and who has his heart open, very powerful man, because he's already resonating emotionally with the future. And by the same means, you see a woman who's taken care of her children and raised a family, and knows how to nurture and love and to encourage, and she gets very single-minded and gets very clear on what she wants, a very powerful woman. So I think the thought and the feeling, the intention and surrender, the mind and emotion are the two elements that create the whole, and I think they represent pretty much that quality of the quantum field that is both willful and intelligent and loving and nurturing, and those two elements create the whole, the yin and the yang.